This is a clip from our Patreon Q&A show where every week we answer your questions on everything West Ham. If you're interested in getting your questions answered or just want to see the full episode, head on over to patreon.com/analyticsunited for that and so much more, including all of our preview coverage for the Brentford game which comes out today. The first week's free. Enjoy the video. Morgan Turner Green says, what do you guys think is the best 11 we can play with the squad available and the way Julian wants us to play?
I would make a few changes to what we've seen so far. So there are a couple of things that we need to talk about really to provide some sort of context here. And the first of those, and the most important of those for me, is that whilst Wan-Bissaka's done quite an impressive job of contributing to the attack, a lot of what we've been speaking about so far is how the team arrives in that sort of 3-2-5 shape in attacking situations, certainly in the final third. And the players that therefore have the most space, because the wingers do an effective job of pinning and narrowing up the back four. And if you're confused by any of this, the video that we did last week as a segment of the Q&A covered exactly what's going on here and how we're generating space for the fullbacks, and how one of the big areas for development at West Ham at the moment is actually for our players to kind of get their heads up in the final third and start looking for those options to play the fullbacks, because that's where the space is. Naturally, what it means though is in attacking situations, the player often with the most space to be impactful in the final third for us is Wan-Bissaka. Now, like I say, as much as I'm impressed with the job he is doing in those situations, and he topped the team for shot creating actions in the Chelsea game. He created two of our best chances, some nice passes around the box, one particularly nice little sort of dinked ball through off the outside of his foot for Bowen. Ultimately, if you were just looking at player profiles, he is not the player in our squad I want to be most important to us in final third situations. So immediately the question becomes who do I want to have the most space in the attack in final third situations? Who can have the most upside? And specifically in those wider moments where they're receiving the ball often wide on the right hand side and have a lot of space to attack. So that's the first question. And then the second question becomes, how do I generate a structure that allows that player to be in that position? And then also, how does the team have to adjust if that player is not going to be a fullback? Because if it's between Vladimir Sofal and Aaron Wan-Bissaka, as much as I think they're both good players, they're not really players that I want to be generating those situations expressly for, really. Because, like I say, they can function in those moments, they can offer things in those moments, but I know we have players in the squad that can do more with those situations. So immediately, really, my first answer to it in terms of adjusting team structure is I would really like to see us narrowing one of the fullbacks in build-up. And there are two ways to do this. Either one of them inverts into midfield, or one of them joins the back three in possession. So we're always building from that 3-2 base. At the moment, the way that we've seen us constructing that for the most part is with Alvarez dropping between the centre-backs, or Rodriguez dropping out to one side. In the second half of the Chelsea match, we saw, or even in the last 10 minutes of the first half as well, we saw Tomáš Souček dropping out to one side of the back three and helping us progress and build up. This is largely because a lot of the teams in the Premier League defend from a 4-4-2 shape, and if you build with a 3 on the first line, you always have a spare player to pass to and build up. When you add the goalkeeper into that, it becomes very easy to progress through first phase and get into sort of a settled possession phase in the middle third. When you're answering that question about whether to invert or narrow one up and have them join the back three, I think clearly for me the most beneficial answer when I'm looking at a profile that we have is for Aaron Wan-Bissaka to join the back three. Now, he's not our greatest player in build-up, but one thing that he does have is he's quite impactful on carries and has shown that already this season, and he's comfortable enough in build-up situations. He's by no means our best player, but he's comfortable enough in those moments. Additionally to this, it's worth saying that there are moments where you might want to adjust your shape to a 2-3-5 rather than a 3-2-5. So that would be one fullback inverting into midfield rather than narrowing and joining a back three. And again, Wan-Bissaka for me is a perfectly adequate option to become part of a 3 in the second line rather than part of a 3 on the first line. So I think either of those situations are good for him, and actually crucially, of all the defenders we have to help us out in transition defence, which has been a really big problem and was a massive problem in the Chelsea game, where we conceded a huge amount of counter-attacking opportunities. Wan-Bissaka is generally very good in these situations and defends quite well in those moments. So yeah, twofold, two reasons why I want him in that kind of position. So the first question that we asked, and to return to that, is who do I want to have the most space and therefore become one of the more impactful players for us in the final third, or be able to be more impactful for us in the final third. And I had to think about this a little bit. I tried sort of lots of different ways of putting the team together, and wasn't really satisfied with many of them until I arrived with Mohamed Kudus being the player that is in that amount of space and can be most impactful for us. And when we're thinking about any of our players who receive as width holders on the right and can be really impactful with their crosses in those situations, I think all the way back to, what was it, the Burnley game last season, with some really nice crosses from the right hand side from Kudus. I think he's one of the players that is really good in these moments and is happy to go either way. His dribbling is so threatening that defenders don't know which way he's going to go, and that means it's really open for him to generate crossing opportunities or actually dribble into the box and create upside by doing that. So those are the two things that immediately happen for me. Wan-Bissaka joins the back three, and Mohamed Kudus moves to the right wing. Question that immediately follows that is what's happening to Jarrod Bowen, and the way to answer that is to look at how you defend. So far we've defended mostly from a 4-3-3 kind of structure. Obviously that has been changing quite a lot, and Lopetegui's been making a lot of alterations to how we defend. So we started the Chelsea game defending more from a 5-2-3, and then tried various different approaches before finally landing on more of a settled 4-3-3 towards the end of the game. Now, I'm fine with defending as a 4-3-3, but I think the thing that you would then have to change is you would have to change the way that the midfield is organised, and Paquetá would probably have to move to the right of the midfield, and Kudus probably has to be stuck out on the left then in those situations. Otherwise, you don't really have a natural solution for who's going to play on the left wing in your defensive shape. So with Kudus wanting to move to the right, I think the easiest and simplest alteration then to the defensive structure is, instead of defending in a 4-3-3, to defend in a 4-4-2 like many of the other teams in the league. And if you think of who is perfectly comfortable being a striker out of possession, is quite good and presses quite well in those moments, Jarrod Bowen is perfectly comfortable in those situations. So that lands with Kudus on the right wing, and with Bowen playing in the right half space, where he has already a lot this season played, with Wan-Bissaka moving outside him. So there's no real change for Bowen, except that out of possession, instead of moving out to the right wing, he would join a front two with Füllkrug and press as more of a striker, with Füllkrug being the player that's probably going to be more passive of the two and be more comfortable dropping off maybe into somewhat of a number 10 position when you need to move into sort of more of a 4-4-1-1 shape. And following on from that, you then get Paquetá out in the left half space, where I think he can be really impactful for us. He is struggling a huge amount at the moment, being more of a second phase guy, and is forcing too many direct balls through the middle of the pitch. It's creating too many situations that are difficult for us in defence as a result. So move him higher up, get him more active in the final third, where he can take those risks, and it creates less of a problem for us defensively. So have him operating in the left half space, and additionally to that, because we're defending in that 4-4-2, he would be playing on the left with Emerson, much like he was last season. Now, I accept that this is not really an ideal way to maximise Paquetá's abilities. On paper, I would much rather have Paquetá in a midfield too, but right now that's not working, and I think everyone can see that that's not working. It's been a really big problem for us. So what can we do? We can look at something that worked really well last season, where Paquetá started as a left winger, had really nice combination play with Emerson, drifted into central areas, and then had high impact in those moments as well. So regenerate those dynamics on the left side of the pitch, with Emerson continuing in the role that he's played so far, where he becomes someone that's useful for us in second phase build-up, particularly playing 1-2s with the winger ahead of him, who comes into more central positions, and then he advances beyond on the outside before often looking to dribble into central areas if he can. Combine again in the final third, and he's done quite a good job of winning free kicks and things in those moments. That means it's quite simple in midfield. Rodriguez and Alvarez, I'm perfectly happy with those two doing that job. A lot of what we've seen at the moment is Rodriguez struggling because Alvarez is dropping in to a back three. So stop that. Have Alvarez alongside him. There you've got the legs and someone that's really good in build-up. So nice combination there. Probably lacks a little bit of progressive dynamism, maybe, or the ability to play a really special pass in the two of them, or generate a really special carry. But actually, I quite like the three behind them for generating those moments. I think Wan-Bissaka could be really good on the carry from that right centre-back position, playing right back defensively when we've lost the ball. And then also, if you wanted to commit 1+ to the attack, I think he could swing round almost akin to Chris Wilder at Sheffield United with, Basham doing those crazy lung-busting runs from centre-back. He could swing round outside Kudus and become the right winger again, should we really need to generate a 6 if a team is defending with a 5. Fullback at the top of the pitch, I don't really think that requires that much explanation. I think he can pin the most players most effectively, hold the ball up most effectively, and score goals more effectively than any of the other options up front. Mikel Antonio struggled at a lot of the jobs required of a striker in a Lopetegui system right now. Comes on against Chelsea and again drifts all the way out to the right wing repeatedly, because he's not able to have the impact that he wants in the middle of the pitch, because every time he gets the ball in those situations, he loses it. So he drifts into more comfortable situations where he can face forward and start carrying the ball. That's not what we need a striker to do, really, with Lopetegui. Fullback will stay in the centre of the pitch, receive the ball, bounce it out to Paquetá and Bowen, and combine with those players. So I think that's a simple decision. And then instead of having two centre-backs that split, you have two centre-backs, one that stays in the centre of the pitch and becomes almost like a quarterback for the team, and one that moves out to the left. Kilman, don't move him. He's been excellent moving out to the left and being hugely useful to us as a progressive player in that position, still contributing incredible progressive numbers, and did so once more in the Chelsea game, although did introduce a little bit of inaccuracy in the second half in that match. I think that was probably more frustration than anything else. And then the obvious change that I think everyone is keen to see at some point this season, with Todibo coming in to replace Mavropanos. I think either of them would be perfectly adequate at this role. Mavropanos was better in the Chelsea game when he was moved to the middle and Alvarez was moved to the right. He initially struggled with the dynamics of Alvarez playing inside him as a central centre-back, but still he has made a number of errors that have led directly to high-quality chances or goals for the opposition. And I think from an in-possession perspective, Todibo as a quarterback, the stuff that he showed at Nice in that position, I mean, he was genuinely exceptional playing as that sort of central centre-back and basically controlling the team from the deepest position and being the conductor, if you like. I would love to see him doing that for us from that area. And so it shapes up as a very simple 4-4-2 without the ball, with players all in the positions that you probably would like them to see in. The only real issues perhaps are that Bowen is playing as a striker rather than a right winger, but that allows Kudus to play in that position and Paquetá as a left midfielder. You could look at that as an issue, or you could look at last season and his defensive data and say this was probably one of his best out of possession seasons in his entire career playing as a left winger. So my position would be actually it's probably his best position without the ball, based on everything I've seen from him as a player and all the data associated. And in possession, the best thing here is that you've got players all in roles that they want to be in. There's not a single player there in that structure that isn't playing in a role that they would personally find ideal. Wan-Bissaka may be the only piece that you're slightly moving around out of where he would really want to be, but I don't think right wing is where he really wants to be either. So I think that he's probably the biggest problem in the squad, from the perspective of how do you fit him into a Julen Lopetegui shape, because he's not really a natural right centre-back, nor is he a right winger, nor is he going to be a midfielder. So, perhaps one of the stranger bits of recruitment, not from the perspective of the player and his performance, of which I think has been perfectly adequate, and if not better than adequate and good at points, more just from how he tactically fits under the manager.
Yeah, it's interesting. During the summer, we had a sort of rolling conversation about this exact idea, like what is the best 11, what is the way this team is shaping up as transfers were coming in, given the fact we had Lopetegui in, and Wan-Bissaka was the big interesting one, where we were all expecting a Jesus Navas type attacking fullback, someone who's going to be really comfortable, wide, high, and providing everything that you would want someone in that area to do it. And Wan-Bissaka is just kind of not that. And so that sort of changed the dynamics of everything we spoke about. And we kept coming back to a structure similar to what you've laid out here. And I think it's interesting. Like, I think you've covered most of the bases. I mean, I think the things people would point out would be Wan-Bissaka sort of playing, sort of more finding himself more centrally as opposed to sort of marauding up and down. Füllkrug obviously starting is something that I think is, I don't want to say controversial, but I think people have question marks over, mainly because we've basically not seen him yet properly, and then Somerville not being included as well. Those are the big things I think people would probably mention from that.
I think, sure, the question of Somerville is probably the most relevant one. With Füllkrug, I do think it ultimately is very simple for me, because the other options are Danny Ings, who's quite clearly not a striker in a Julian Lopetegui system. If he is going to play, he's going to play in one of those two number 10 positions rather than as the out-and-out number 9. Lopetegui really requires someone who is either has the physical capacity to drop in, spin and get in behind, or someone who can hold the ball up really effectively, and Danny Ings is neither of those things, so he can't play that position. Mikel Antonio should be a drop in and spin guy, but he just isn't at this stage of his career. He's not been able to offer that to us so far this season, and his hold up is just nowhere near good enough to play that role. And he's also adding out of possession problems where he's falling asleep as part of the press, and that therefore is creating space for the press to be played round, which then exposes issues in deeper areas and exposes us to almost transition-like conditions when teams are building out from the back, which is not something you want at all. So if you take those two out of the equation, it becomes between Bowen and Füllkrug. I think there is a conversation to be had there, because one of them is more drop spin and getting behind, and the other one is more geared around hold up. And for me personally, I would much prefer someone who's more geared around hold up than the drop spin in behind kind of thing, because what I'm seeing us do more successfully than anything else we've done this season is control the ball for periods. So for me, it's not about having the big transition threat up front more than anything else. It's actually about having the guy who can pin the most players and therefore create the most space for others, and also the best anticipation in the box to get on the end of things that are dropping, and the physical presence in the box that when the ball does go wide to players like Kudus and Emerson or whoever it is in those wide receiving situations, when the ball is swung into the box, can they get on the end of things? Are they able to dominate centre-backs and head the ball into the back of the net? Yeah, Füllkrug for me becomes really the very clear choice of all the strikers we have available to play through the middle.